To the live stream. I'm here with my good friend Bryan Caplan. We're going to talk about economic misinformation and maybe some of Bryan's new book that's still coming out in sometime next year, which I've been reading and is very good. So, Bryan, you read my article on the
Mhm.
economic misinformation question. I've always been kind of annoyed. I do think economics is, in a sense, a science. Like somebody was saying in my comments, like, oh, it's not a science because you could have build more housing, for example, and prices might not go down because of the fact. Well, it's like gravity. It's like you could throw something in the air and it might not come down because the wind might blow on it or somebody might grab it
Mhm.
or something like that. But gravity is still a thing, and I think the laws of supply and demand are similarly a thing. I think it's as good as we get in the human affairs, and it's pretty good. Um, yeah, just your thoughts on kind of the idea that like economics, if it even rises to the level of where we could say some things are just misinformation or not.
There's a very strange bifurcation between negative views on economics. One of them is it's all obvious, so it's like it's not science because everybody knows it already. That's one story. And then there's another one of that's just total ideology. So it's like price controls cause shortages. One story is there's no need to tell anyone this. Everyone knows it already. No one can deny it. Who cares? And then the other one that's completely made up. That's just a right wing view, and any left wing person who believes it, they're actually right wing too. So it is weird. Uh, like the main objection I really have to this term misinformation is it does strongly suggest that everyone would be right if only it weren't for being told wrong things. And I think that is not how economics works. Probably not how science works either, because there's a lot of ideas in science where people's initial instinct is just wrong. The idea that it takes an arrow time to accelerate after it leaves the bow is very widespread, for example. But with economics, uh, yeah, there's so there's let's see, where was I? Yeah, so but yeah, sorry, it'll come back to me.
Okay, so yeah, you're saying economics with there's some ideas that
Mhm.
people. You said something interesting. You said that it's not just about telling people their ideas are wrong. Is it? Were you
Ah,
going? Where were you going with that?
yes. Oh yeah. So like with economics, there's a lot of ideas that are just very popular, and especially popular among people who have never studied the subject. So, for example, I think it's fair to say that 90% of people who have never heard of comparative advantage are protectionist. It
Mhm.
is the natural thing for human beings. And what's striking to me is if you talk to children who have
Mhm.
not had much time to be misinformed about anything, children, like, of course, if they can't speak, they don't have an opinion. But once they're able to speak, it is actually very common, I found. And I spend a lot of time talking to children, actually, because I've got a bunch of kids and I like talking about economics to kids just to find out what they'll say. I mean, it's just striking to me how ideas like protectionism or intentions equals results are just very natural to a person that has not put much time into it. And these are
Right.
things that have to be unlearned. So, like, my main objection to misinformation is it sort of is it assumes that people are originally pure and would have at least reasonable views or be a blank slate. And I think the real story is there are some views that actually just well it very naturally, and it's a lot of work to get them out of them. And then it certainly doesn't help if you've got experts going and saying, yes, yes, of course, there are no trade offs. That's just right wing ideology to think there are trade offs.
So yeah, I don't know if it's actually, I've never had that implicit model of the world when talking about misinformation. I never had the implicit model that it means that people are kind of blank slates, and the only reason that they're wrong is they've been misinformed. So, vaccines is a kind of canonical case where we talk about misinformation. I don't think most people who say they fight vaccine misinformation think that people are neutral, like between being pro-vaccine and anti-vaccine. I think that probably they would find it very plausible that people would think a shot that puts a disease into your arm is a scary
Mhm.
thing. Like, I don't think people just wake up and they're kind of neutral between doing that or not doing that. They just need the information. So it's still misinformation, even if it has a natural basis. The misinformation is not the root of it. It's a problem when it becomes kind of intellectualized and spread.
I mean, you've been talking with people about anti-vax thinking a lot more than I have, but that's one where I would think that the normal view is if doctors want to do something for children, it's good.
Well,
And yes, it's true if you actually learn what was in a vaccine, that's what would make you scared. But the normal thing actually is just to hear it's medicine, and of
mm,
course it's going to be good. And doctors don't want to hurt children, so I would
yeah,
say again that is one where it seems more like there are some people that just are trying to go and just spread total errors. Although even there, like you're right. Like if you want to spread an error, you want to find the point of least resistance. And like about like your died suddenly thing. Like one point of least resistance is, well, look, do you know that some people got the vaccine still died? How do you explain that?
yeah.
And that's something where a lot of normal people are like, oh my god, like people who got it and still died. Not only and like, well, maybe that just means it's not perfectly effective. No, no, probably means that it's the cause of the death.
Yeah, and it's effective because I think the vaccine, the needle thing, I never got, but
Mhm.
Ayala wrote an article about this, and she's a somewhat of a rationalist. I thought it was something that only like silly, kind of very primitive people had afraid of needles. I've never understood this, but apparently she's like very afraid of needles, and people will like faint if like a needle is put by their. And I
Yes,
just find that.
actually, I'm totally in that book. I even faint from having my eyes dilated for an eye exam. Actually,
Wait,
I have.
what? So you can't do it?
Um, I nor like I haven't done eye dilation for a long time because now I've got eye doctors who say, all right, they say, well, let's try it without it. And they say they can still see it. And I'm like, well, I don't want to risk fainting if they don't
Wow.
even really need to do it.
That's amazing. I've never had any fear of like I had a surgery once where like, they peel the skin and I look at it and I'm just fine with that. I can do that. That's weird. But I have weird things like roller coasters like scare me. But like most people are not as scared of roller coasters, but I'm not scared of anything physical or violent. It's kind of weird for
I mean,
people's.
sort of going back to misinformation, to my mind, like the real telltale sign that an error came specifically from some pseudo expert spinning up a web of ridiculous stories is when it's really specific. It's really specific, like Kennedy assassinations theories. That's something where most people believe those. They don't come up with their own unique Kennedy assassination theory. There
Mm.
is some Svengali who is crafting the whole story and then spreading it, and then people are believing that one. And again, same with monster conspiracies like Bigfoot. It's striking how within a given culture, there's sort of a list of which monsters people believe in and which ones they don't. And that one seems, if not exactly top down, there's at least an epicenter of the mythology. On the other hand, for economics, I think it really is actually hard to find where did this error start. It's more coming out of just natural human error. Um, a lot of economists want to say it's because economics is so counterintuitive. I even said this myself a couple of times, but I very scrupulously stopped when I realized, like, it's not that economics is counterintuitive, it's that it's counter emotional. It's
Mm.
not counterintuitive that raising wages leads to unemployment, but it's very counter emotional. It's just like, how dare you say such a
But
thing?
then the emotions are the intuitions, right? It's like people don't like the sound of something, so they have an intuition that it's wrong. So I don't know if that's a real distinction.
So I think there's actually, it really is worth distinguishing between what just seems obvious to you and what actually rubs you the wrong way. And they are different things.
I think
Like
you're
an
you're not.
example of this that seems very convincing to me is out of people who are not religious, they generally think that religious people believe they've got great arguments. But if you actually have ever been religious or talked to religious people, a lot of what they say is of course, there's no argument for it. You just have to take it on faith.
Mm.
And, like all of the it's to be believed because it is absurd. That's actually much more typical religious thought than the claim to have some really great argument. And like to me, it's very striking that even someone who's defending it doesn't want to say, "Oh, it's totally obvious to me that Jesus Christ rose from the dead." Much more likely to say, "No, no. I mean, like it's a miracle. It's nothing that you would ever believe, except that it hits you in the heart." And that's where the way I would see this distinction between counterintuitive, which is it's an intellectual appearance that just strikes you as really likely, whereas counter emotional is just like, I do not want to hear these lies.
Mm. The but okay, so for the case of So okay, so we started with this distinction between the idea of misinformation. You don't like the misinformation framing. What does that change in practical
Mhm,
effect as far as like what I think is right? So I
mhm,
imagine something. This gets a bad rap, but I think it's right. I think to treat it like the way we treat anti-vax, even though anti-vax is
mhm,
on the rise, it's still it's still not as it's still not as
mhm,
strong as economic illiteracy, right? I mean,
mhm.
there are like certain science aspects
Mhm.
of science where we basically just treat this as like this is false information. And if you read like a New York Times or a Washington Post article, they'll say this person believes peanuts cause cancer, and they'll say that this is like without evidence. They'll just say it's without evidence,
Mhm.
right? So I think
Isn't
like
there
economic.
just on that one point, aren't there like a bunch of papers claiming peanut butter specifically is some super carcinogen, which I've always just been like, what?
Yeah,
Peanut butter? How can
maybe.
churning
It's just
peanuts
it's
turn
just an
into a
example.
carcinogen?
I don't know anything about
Okay.
yeah, whether penis cause cancer. It could be true for all I know. But basically, when we think something is false, we just accept that it's false, and we say it. We insert it
Mhm,
into normal news articles. We in the textbooks we teach we teach kids
mhm.
that vaccines don't cause autism and so forth. Do you have any issue or kind of hesitation of treating certain economic truths in that way?
Yeah, not at all. I would say, like, as to exactly why public opinion gets so wrong, it doesn't matter that much whether it's just deeply rooted in human nature to dislike the ideas or whether there are some deceivers, conscious or unconscious, who are spreading it and then messing up people. Either way, people who do understand what's going on, there's value in going and trying to correct it and say that this is no, this is incorrect in terms of like exactly how you would counter it. I think that if it's something where people are just making mistakes largely on their own initiative, that's where it really is very worthwhile to go and say, "Look, well, let's just hold on. What have you actually seen with your own eyes? Like, what is the argument for this?" Whereas if you were countering specific information sources, that's where you might impugn the integrity of the speaker, something like that, and say, like, you're listening to someone who's very unreliable. Where so for protectionism, for example, we have the standard list of thought experiments, like really simple one. Frederick Bastiat says people complain about countries selling their products at a loss. Imagine that we just got stuff washing up on our shores totally for free. Would that be a problem? Wouldn't that actually be great if we just got perfectly good imports that arrived on the beach free of charge? Well, once you believe that, then why are you complaining about something that's intermediate between that and full price? That's something where it is actually directly addressing an argument. It's trying to take a person where they stand, and again, it's not thinking there's someone that misled them or just told them something's wrong. And in that case, notice Bastiati's not going and saying you have been deceived or like don't listen to somebody. He's just saying, look, calm down and let's look at the facts. So I think that like in terms of the exact framing of the correction, it does matter, but right in terms of the value, it doesn't matter so much.
Yeah. Do you agree with my idea that there's probably great returns to doing this? Like if I had like, I don't know, $1 million or something, like to set up like some kind of organization, like a media watchdog organization, right?
Mhm,
There's like these things, GLAD, which would
mhm.
like bully these
Yeah.
media to like you use correct pronouns and like use the take the LGBT line on every issue. And for a long time, the media really, really deferred to them, and probably less so now. I think that would be a good use of someone's resources and time potentially to like set some kind of equivalent up. And I think you could do it without it being that controversial. You have to really stick to the facts. Like
Mhm,
you have to not let it lapse into partisanship into either side.
mhm,
But I think this is something like the media would be open to and could have like a
mhm.
positive
I'm not as confident that $1 million would be
well, whatever,
anything
10
significant.
million, whatever,
Right, yeah,
whatever.
10,000,000. I mean, so, just going back to your stuff on why everything is liberal, like, when there is just a lot of passion on one side to go and correct an error or maybe correct a truth, it's a lot easier to get this leverage impact from one activist group going and hassling people. Whereas, part of the problem with economics is there's just not that many people even who know it really deeply, who care about it that much. I mean, in a way, like, one of the puzzles for me, an economics professor, is the large share of top academics who never talk to the media about anything, who don't have the slightest interest in talking about even their own work with any broader audience. That's I think out of like actual successful research economists, think at least three quarters pretty much have zero interest in talking to any broader audience and getting any influence for the ideas at all. In
That's
terms of like,
yeah.
I mean, again, I agree that it's weird, but like the facts are just plain. Like most economists just don't see, and like they don't. So I mean, some of it is just the sheer selfishness of like, how does this advance my career? It's like, well, I guess it doesn't really
Mhm.
advance your career in a narrow sense. It's what justifies the existence of your work, which is that you try to improve the world with it. And then it's like, that's for activists. Like, well, there are no
Yeah.
activists other than you that have even read your paper. So it's either you or
Yeah.
nobody that promotes this stuff.
Well, this is I mean, isn't this kind of a strange strange characteristic of economists? Because I feel like most people who study immunology or they study vaccines,
Mhm.
they are bothered by the misinformation that's out there. I think people who like study climate change are bothered by the information that is out there
Mhm.
that they believe is false. So, aren't most fields like upset when their work is kind of ignored and our politics is based around misinformation, but somehow
Hmm.
economists are not?
Hmm. A lot of what's going on is that uh, just to back up. So people generally think of economists as being a very right wing, and if you just look at the data, there's no data that I've ever seen for any historical period where that is true. Basically, in the mid '90s, you would see something like a Democrat Republican ratio among
Yeah.
research economists of like 3 to 2. And then now it's more like 4 or 5 to 1. And among young research economists, it's more like 10 or 15 to 1.
Mhm.
So just to back
So
up and
are
just
they
and then just
becoming more left wing on economics, or are they just turned off by the Republican Party being Trumpified?
So that's a good question. It's probably a mixture of both, but I think it's probably about three quarters just being actually genuinely more left wing. I
Mm.
think young economists like they are quite woke and uh, again more reflexively, but this gets to the like the main point, which is that I think honestly, when most economists want to get outraged by something, they basically put on their partisan hat to get outraged. They don't
Mm.
so often get outraged qua economist. A lot of economists, especially, have a fairly strict version of there's me as a normal human being where I have a political allegiance and I have opinions and I'm passionate, and me as a economic researcher where I don't have any opinions and I don't want to go and say or endorse much of anything. I just want to go and say, well, these are the facts. If you want to make countries poorer, you do this. If you want to make them richer, you do the other thing. And who am I to say whether countries should be richer or poorer? It is a strange mentality because you don't see many virologists saying, "Well, I mean, if you're pro-virus, then you would go and do the opposite."
No.
They just take it for granted. Look, no one's going to be pro-virus. Whereas I do know economists who actually have the idea of whether it's better to be totally poor or super rich is itself something that I would never dream of weighing in on.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, it is kind of a certain, maybe a certain kind of person goes into economics. So, like, women are more into like biology. Like, I think
Mhm,
there are is like a people concern kind of thing where it's hard to separate the politics versus kind of
mhm,
the ideas. And I think maybe economist draws like kind of more autistic, mathy kind of
mhm,
guys who maybe just kind of enjoy the intellectual pursuit for its own sake.
mhm,
And maybe that's it. Maybe it's like, people study ancient Greek and Latin. They don't
mhm,
care even that much about what's going on in the world. They're just enjoying themselves doing their own thing, right?
mhm. Yeah, there is some of that. I mean, what has long struck me is when eminent research economists will go and actually, like, they still do this actually, but like this is a little bit dated, but it's not anywhere gone. Is they'll go and like cut out some article in the newspaper, like an op-ed by someone who could barely get a C in one of their classes, and they'll
Mm.
post it to their door, and it's like, why are you publicizing this person that you wouldn't even give a C to? There is an idea of like activism is just a different area, and you don't need to be
Wait,
smart or knowledgeable.
why do they post these things? These are just
You
something
know,
that
because they politically agree with it.
okay. So
Right, like, if you
it'll be an
just sort of
op-ed
walk
about
if you walk down an academic economics department, especially the doors of the older faculty, you will often see, like, wallpaper of a bunch of newspaper articles, and it's just like, "What is this stuff?" And then you read it, and, like, there might be some firebrand saying, "Oh, this new tax bill is terrible for the poor."
Mhm.
And it's like, don't you know way more than this person about the distributional effects of taxes and incentive effects? Why are you publicizing this person that would be like was not fit to go and sit in your classroom. And it's like, well, like that's not the important thing. Like, well,
Yeah.
what the hell is the important thing? The important thing is whether you're smart or knowledgeable. It's whether you're passionate. So, like, if you have sort of this idea of people have a certain amount of passion they want to express about policy, for a lot of economists, it's like I get that all out of my system when I have my professional hat off.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
then when my professional hat is on, that's where I'm not going to really even give you that definitive an answer. If I do, I'm going to be so cagey and so guarded that most listeners wouldn't even know what the point was.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, so going back to what you said about, most of the, shift to the left among economists being about actually them being woker and more left wing,
Mhm,
my intuition, I'm from outside the field, I don't know, but I think that kind of the Trump brand, I mean, it started with,
mhm,
the religious right and George W. Bush, but then especially with Trump, just kind of the branding of the Republican Party as,
mhm,
like, the rural Christian,
mhm,
xenophobes, people who don't read, the conspiracy theorists. I think that has, like, seeped into everything. And I wonder,
mhm,
like, to me, I think that could explain like a shift, like all by itself. So, do you have actual evidence or data or survey
mhm.
that says that they're actually on the substance of like pro market versus anti market that economists are becoming more left wing?
So I know that a lot of the shift happened before 2015.
Yeah, but that's still
Yeah. So in
that
terms of
polarization has started. Yeah.
yes, and so like in terms of what's happened since, that's one where it's like you're right. It's honestly harder to say. It's so like I say, like the main thing that was striking to me after that is there were actually quite a few eminent economists who got on a bunch of weird cancellation bandwagons, and
Mm.
it did seem like they
They were younger.
were very much supported by young economists in this. Although again, that like as we know, social media sometimes is just smoke and mirrors, and it doesn't really reflect. It doesn't really take the pulse of a generation, so should be cautious. Uh, so, but yeah, so in terms of like major cancellations, so you had the, so the Roland Fryer cancellation, you had the Harold Ulick
Sure.
cancellation. There were all of the multiple names that Jennifer Doliak dragged through the mud, and then of course there was the
Doliak is funny, by the way, because she has some very politically incorrect findings on crime, and then
Mhm.
she also talks about what else? Oh, she was had this controversy where she said the minimum wage was stupid, and people got mad at her. But then she was also like trying to cancel people for sexual harassment. I don't know if you want to
Yeah,
comment, but just a very interesting woman.
right. I mean, the main thing I noticed is look, this is only from memory, but it really did look to me like she was just saying privately email accusations and I will report them as fact.
Yeah, I know, but that's interesting. But that's
Right? And
interesting
it's just
because
like,
she's kind of
I mean,
yeah.
like, if you're listening, Jennifer, all right, look, let's go through the exact things you said. They sure sounded that way to me. And that is wrong.
Yeah, but that's an interesting case because Jennifer Doliak still is like has like right wing findings on crime, right?
Yes.
She has right wing,
Yeah, as well as some right
so
wing connections.
it's
But
kind of it's kind of consistent. Like they could be anti-Trump, they could be culturally left,
yeah.
and in some ways be still have free market views, right? It's kind of not inconsistent. So yeah, we need data on that. I mean, the Chicago booth they do the
Mhm,
surveys. I wonder if someone looked at age
mhm.
or something like that. They do these surveys in economists. I'm sure somebody could break that down and find out.
Yes. I mean, I guess if I were talking, or one of my first questions would be, what about that paper showing that Me Too caused co-authorship between senior male economists and junior female
Mhm.
economists to crash down to real low levels? And or the more general point of, yeah, remember type 1 and type 2 error?
Mm. Yeah.
Remember
Yeah, she seems to
how
have lost her mind. Yeah,
like
exactly.
you're totally focused on people getting away with stuff they shouldn't get away with. What about people being accused of stuff that was either innocent or debatable?
Yeah.
Right? And then when people are thinking about, gee, like, should I do something that might possibly be questionable?
Mhm. Yeah.
So you like there like I remember at the time there was this bizarre feminist line of, look, well, like there's hardly any actual false accusations. And it's like, first
Yeah.
of all, there's the puzzle how you know that. But anyway, look, even if it's a tiny share, since you're encouraging people to do a lot of mentoring throughout their lifetimes, a small share
Mm.
of false accusations equals a high probability of being victimized by false accusations at some point during career, all because you were just being a nice person and helping other people.
Mhm. Mhm.
You can see why
Yeah.
someone might say, I don't want a 2% risk of being accused of sexual harassment, so I won't do something that even leads to that, even though, yes, fine, it's 98% safe.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so people who are listening, if somebody wants to dig into the data of the economic surveys and see whether they've actually shifted, younger
Mhm,
economists have shifted on
mhm,
issues rather than this
mhm.
being anecdotal or whatever.
Yeah.
That would be
Yeah, yeah, the
interesting.
other thing, which again, is not prove the point, but is still interesting, is I've gotten multiple surveys, I think actually from the AER, where basically they just take woke views completely for granted, and
Mm,
so they'll ask you surveys saying like, "So what have you seen in terms of structural racism?"
mm,
And it's just like, okay, I'm waiting for the opportunity to say like I disagree, but
mm,
like especially if it's not free response, then it's just like structure. Like there's no way to go and say I
mm,
think that the actual structural racism is against whites or Asians, or
mm.
basically like basically trying to force you into an answer where whatever you say it is a woke answer.
Yeah.
Again, that could of course just be some very strident activists who managed to hijack the
Yeah. Yeah.
system.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Like a lot of, I was kind of hardened. So I see a little bit of this on The Economist pushing back. So I remember in 2016, you might remember, or was it might have been 2020 was one of them. Bernie Sanders releases a budget, and basically all the left wing economists revolt and they say the numbers here make no sense. So it's kind of that was
Mhm,
a kind of so we have these anecdotes where it's like a kind of encouraging
mhm.
signs. They're very excited with Trump's Liberation Day tariffs to really go hard against
Yeah.
Trump, right? Because this is where their partisanship and their field match
Mhm,
together. And so, yeah, you do see some of this, like when the politics
mhm,
line up,
mhm.
they will act like people do in other fields. So I think that yeah, what you're saying about their partisanship hat and their scholar hat is yeah, that's right. These are two different things. And then I've always said, as I said this in the article, that this gives us more reason to trust the pro market conclusions of the field of
Yes.
economics
Yeah, I
because they're
definitely like that point. I mean,
yeah,
contrary to like all the critics of neoliberalism, they're just factually wrong that economists are right wing.
yeah.
This is so wrong.
And their bias would be in the direction of
Yes.
if you have
Mhm.
suspicions about the field,
Yes.
it's that it's too anti-market, right? Because they
Mhm.
everything in their kind of partisanship would make them want to support the Democratic
Mhm.
Party, would want to make them go to the left, and they are on the
Mhm.
left. They are the Democratic Party. Still, they come to the conclusion where they're
Mhm.
well to the right of the average Democratic voter or the Democratic
Mhm.
politician on most economic issues.
Yes. I mean, the main way that you have to think about this is that, of course, for the hard left, even very left wing economists are still going to get classified as right wing. Why?
Yeah,
Because they have a few beliefs that look right wing.
yeah,
And that's all it takes. There's the tautology of, look, if you're against rent control, you are right wing, end of story. That's it. And the fact that it's like, look, I've been a Democrat my entire life. I like all my friends are Democrats. It's just like you're just a mole. Like
mm-hmm.
like you're self deluded, false consciousness. That's not how you really are. I mean, so like since you mentioned the book that I just sent to University of Chicago, which hopefully is coming next year, Unbeatable, The Brutally Honest Case for Free Markets. Just seeing how hated Larry Summers is among the left is just striking. And the way that and again,
Yeah,
like to a lot of these people, Larry and Milton Friedman and me are like the same guy.
yeah,
And like Larry Summers, like he is like, so I actually, in my book, I found out a statement that he made right after he got tenure in his mid 20s. I think he was like the second youngest guy to ever get tenure in the history of Harvard. And it's all about how we need more distribution, more government. And I found another book-ending sentence right after he became a senior citizen saying the same thing. And it's like, here's a guy who, from the earliest thing he wrote to the most recent thing, he has been saying, I'm totally left wing. I believe in regulation. I believe in redistribution. And yet there's people who are angry at him because he's there in 2021 saying Biden's budget is going
mm,
to cause inflation,
yeah.
and that's bad.
Mm.
Or like again, like the most
No.
ludicrous
And completely
accusation.
vindicated, and then Trump came back and won the election on the
Yeah,
inflation
yeah,
issue,
yeah.
right?
That's
Yeah,
right.
it's
I mean,
self-destruct.
again, like the most. Let's see, what was it? Oh yeah, the most ludicrous one is there's actually people. So like basically during COVID, as you might remember, people are getting piles of government money, and Larry Summers wrote a piece saying this is wonderful. I think we should give them even more, but there has to be a limit.
Mhm.
And then there were left wing people saying, look at this horrible
Yeah,
neoliberal saying there has to be a limit. And this was like, so you think it should be like $1 trillion per person? Like, how is he wrong? Of course, like, like it's like you're
yeah.
lashing out and saying he's right wing for saying the sky is blue.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, let's talk about your book. I've read the first few chapters. Um, yeah, it's very good. You're probably going I mean, it's like 6 can people pre-order it already?
No, no.
Okay.
So again, it still hasn't even begun the refereeing process. So it's University of Chicago. There's a full refereeing process,
That's interesting.
which
Did you think about, have you ever published with a non-academic publisher?
yes, I have. So I've got my kids' book is with Basic Books,
Mhm.
and then I've got my first graphic novel is with an imprint of Macmillan for second, and then my other graphic novels with Cato. So I have done non-academic books,
Uh-huh.
absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe should you want to hold on it? Hold off on it. I think we can hold off on it because I think that
Okay,
let's talk about it closer to the time where people can actually uh,
okay,
buy the
okay.
book. I want to talk about. I guess let's talk about the UAE because you wrote that article about utopia, which actually was one of the most inspiring things I can remember reading in a while.
Yeah.
And this is kind of fascinating. I've always thought like, there is this kind of like, there's this racism, right? There's this xenophobia, not, nativism. And it's funny because like their policy prescriptions would generally make the people they claim to care about worse
Mhm,
off. Like
mhm.
white Americans, if you cut off trade and
Yeah.
you cut off immigration, would be
Like
worse off.
The Walmart's half empty. Great. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Nobody's gonna mow your lawn and whatever. Everything costs, twice as much, whatever.
Real Americans mow their own lawns, Richard.
Yeah, so they take
Joke
care of their
sometimes.
own kids. Yeah, you have this moralistic sense that you're being degraded if someone does work for you. But yeah, if you were a real racist, you would basically advocate like all Americans living like kings and having basically
Mhm.
servants, right? You would advocate something closer to the Gulf Arab model.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes I think like maybe we should just like destigmatize actual racism because then people could be more honest, right? They wouldn't have to come up with new economic theories that are false and will hurt people. They will be able to actually like rationally go about maximizing the welfare of the group that they care about.
Mhm.
Is that something we might do?
Not impossible. I do think that if you destigmatize it, there's just a lot of people who just want to say negative things about groups they don't like all day, and they just run
Well,
out.
give them that freedom. Let them say negative things,
Yeah.
and
I mean,
let
so I do actually have a friend who has gotten to talk to some Gulf monarchy labor ministers off the record.
Mm.
And what he says is off the record when no one's listening, they just say, yeah, ha, ha, we're exploiting them. Isn't it great? So, like, they themselves don't accept my view, which is that you are
Yeah,
creating incredible opportunities for
right.
people that otherwise are just frozen out of the international economic order.
That's interesting. So these Arab Gulf ministers, they don't sit around like we're providing a great humanitarian benefit.
Yeah,
They're like,
yeah,
they're like,
like they will do press conferences like that, and they will, like their PR people are saying there. But it
yeah,
seems like off the record, they essentially believe the villainous stories that are told about them,
that's funny.
and they are just sort of like, yeah, ha ha ha, isn't it hilarious how much we sucker these Pakistanis into coming near and building all of our stuff? Uh, but it's like, all right, look, there's intentions and there's results.
Yeah.
Whatever they have in their hearts, the fact remains that millions of people from desperately poor countries are able to go and make 5 times as much money as they could back home, and they are not slaves. They're nothing like slaves. Even with various restrictions on the jobs they can do. Uh, Despite that, they're still texting their friends and relatives. Totally come. This is fantastic. They go home and they're the richest guy in their village. Um, yes. So
Yeah.
by the way, the seasonality of plane tickets to the Gulf monarchies is so extreme that
Mhm.
if you're willing to put up with terrible weather, you can go there on the cheap.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so, like, this
People
like,
don't want to be there in the summer. Is that it?
yeah, so, like, the summer, like even last October, I've been to Emirates twice, Qatar once. Even in October, Emirates was basically about the most horrible weather I think I've ever
Mhm.
experienced.
Mhm.
Like, I just couldn't even believe human beings tolerate it.
But it's all air conditioned and indoors stuff,
Yeah,
right?
yes, but you step outside once in a while, and then
Yeah.
it's just like, I cannot believe human
Yeah.
beings lived here before air conditioning.
Mhm.
But the upshot is that during those months of terrible weather, I think you can get like good round trip tickets for like $500. Hotels are
Mm.
cheap. So if you really just want to be an adventure tourist and just to go and see an amazing place and to have your whole worldview shaken. But
Mm.
here's the thing is like I knew about them, but I
But
hadn't
can
been
I can
until
I like?
recently.
Is it possible
Yeah.
to take my kids and like hire cheap nannies and hire cheap drivers and stuff like that?
Yeah,
Is
no,
that
yeah,
possible too?
cheap drivers, totally. Nannies, like I didn't try. I think it would be very easy.
Mhm.
Like probably if you try to arrange it through the hotel, then there'd be some big markup or something.
Yeah.
But if you, I don't know, whatever their version of TaskRabbit is, then yeah, you could probably get a great Filipino nanny or
Huh.
Filipina nanny. And so yeah, like like I think like this is probably not perfect, but roughly speaking, it looks like during the worst weather you can get a probably a nonstop round trip ticket to Emirates for $500.
Okay.
Now, on the other hand, in December, January, it's like $2,500
Wow,
for that same
interesting.
ticket.
And
And
that's just
I assume
tourists because
hotels are also just as bad.
that's just tourists because I assume the servants have to they're going to be. I don't think that's seasonal, right? They're basically always
Yeah,
booked.
yeah. So definitely going to be less seasonal anyway.
Yeah,
But yeah, so you've got three kids, so but like if you're willing to go and in the the horrible summer, and so like some of the funnest stuff for kids, like they have like tons of outdoor water parks in both
yeah,
Emirates and Qatar. So like that's I would say that is not good in that heat. It's
yeah.
terrible.
Okay.
um,
But if you were
it,
happy
it,
with like you could have an indoor, you can avoid, you can go to restaurants and malls.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Again, the malls you could walk for 10 miles and never feel the sun.
Uh-huh.
So
Is
there's
it kind of
tons
like
and tons of
Vegas
great
where the
indoor stuff
hotels and
too.
malls are the hotels and like the shopping areas and all that are connected?
So, yes, yeah, definitely some of them, and even if they aren't, you can just have a like door to door service. So
Yeah.
all that stuff is
That
great.
sounds amazing. Okay. I've always wanted
Yeah,
to go. I thought it was too expensive and inconvenient
yeah.
with
So
family,
like
but
if you start booking now for the winter when the weather's great, then yeah, it is crazy expensive. But if
okay,
you're
which ones
willing,
have you been to? Just the Emirates?
yeah, yeah. So Emirates and Qatar.
Mhm.
Yeah. So and yeah, and this to me is what's really striking. Like if you go there with any kind of notion of like the Arabs cannot build a civilization, the Arabs are so terrible, and you go there and like, well, these Arabs did it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
and again, it's not and like it'd be one thing if they were like mediocre and everyone else sucked, but it's like
Mm.
they're like in many ways this is the best country in the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just like anyone who goes there and just says, I didn't see anything good there. It's like, you could only say that if you just had some horrible dogma and refused to open your eyes and just consider
Wow.
something that was different.
Which impressed you more, the Gulf Arabs or Japan?
So wait, what was the first part of the question?
Which impressed you more? The Arab,
Yeah, no, the Gulf monarchies impressed me a lot more. Partly
uh,
because I just knew less
even in
about
like
it, but
terms of like
also
cleanliness and stuff. It's just,
I mean, there's like a value added element to the Gulf monarchies, where it's like you start with a country it seems like it could be Syria or even Gaza, and
yeah,
then you do this. And
yeah,
it's like, what
yeah,
did you like? How did you
yeah,
start off with 300,000 people and their main industry was pearl diving and turn into this? And anyone who just wants to say, oh, it's just oil, it's just natural gas. It's like, there's a lot of countries that have plenty of oil and natural gas, like
yeah,
Venezuela, and they're complete disaster zones.
mhm,
Stop trying to go and figure out a way to deny these incredible countries credit for their incredible accomplishments and instead say, what can we learn and
yeah,
what are we wrong about and what are we just being unreasonably stubborn about? The only thing that I can really get from people who are anti-immigration but know about the Gulf monarchies is, oh, well, it's just a bunch of helots.
yeah,
And it's like, so have you talked to them? Because you know what? I talk to every person there that I can. I
yeah,
really do. So like every person I'm interacting with, I'm finding out. So where are you from? As you might guess, they're not touchy about it at all. I mean,
mhm,
not like American immigrants are touchy about it either, but
mhm,
they are just delighted to go and tell you, I'm from Zimbabwe. I'm from countries where you're like, wow, I've never met anyone who managed to get to the first world from that country. And here he
yeah,
is cleaning the pool.
yeah,
And there's a certain kind of misanthropic person who will say, he's just a pool boy. Who cares?
yeah,
How
yeah,
is this anything good? It's like, because now there's a clean pool
yeah,
and people can afford to be here. And like, why are you trying to stop this guy in Zimbabwe from not only improving his life, but supporting his family? Like,
yeah,
why do you think why do you think Sweden is so great compared to Emirates? Sweden wouldn't let this guy come in and clean pools, would it?
yeah.
Shame on Sweden.
Yeah, yeah. Sweden that has worse living standards for its own people, and also doesn't is not as much of a humanitarian country either. Yeah, it's weird. Do you
I
think
mean,
it's
I say, look, like I think it's just Sweden. Like they're more humanitarian than Emirates in the literal sense of we are going to go and just do
intentions?
something
Right. Yeah.
give you something for nothing.
Yeah.
There's very little something for nothing in Emirates unless you're one of
Yeah.
the small share of the people that's a citizen. But in
Yeah.
terms of actually allowing people to help themselves and just lifting desperately poor people out of poverty, that's where the Gulf monarchies are
Yeah.
stellar performers.
Yeah. The divergence between intentions and
Yeah,
actual
yeah,
outcomes is
yeah.
quite incredible there.
Yeah,
Uh,
my guess is if you could get a Swedish labor minister off the record, he would still be super concerned to say the right things and to express sympathy and pity for all humanity. But then it's like, well, why can't we let that guy in? It's very complicated.
Yeah.
It's like, oh God,
Yeah. Yeah.
just give me like a total cynic who's
Yeah.
ready to do business.
Yeah, it's yeah, it's kind of weird. I'm reading the Asamoglu and Robinson book. How what is it? How nations succeed or how nations
Yeah,
fail, or whichever.
Why nations fail?
Why nations, yeah, why nations fail. And it's very interesting. Did they because the whole thing is like political inclusion leads
Mhm.
to good economic results. And I'm just waiting, like, is he gonna bring up Singapore? Is he gonna bring up the Gulf countries? No. No,
Yeah.
it's just all glorious revolution and then pointing to these left-wing countries. I'm like, oh, he's not really not considering the kind of the alternative case here and kind of the countries that provide some kind of problem for his theory.
Yeah, I mean, like that whole body of work is just so terrible, just based
Yeah.
on this simplistic idea that people will vote for their objective self-interest, and once they're included in the system, then you'll get something that's great for everybody. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's just like, look, what the hell do you think would happen within 20 years if Emirates started having free elections?
Yeah, it wouldn't
Like,
be great.
oh, yeah, yeah.
You
So
get
look,
yeah,
20% chance that
you'd
things
get
are fine,
you'd get
but
Hamas.
like much
Yeah,
higher chance that
yeah.
like they just ruin this great system.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there's something to it, and like, there's probably like when he talks about glorious revolution, or maybe like different elites like balancing against one another, business interests against government. That makes sense. You can go too far to this place where it's just a kind of blind faith in people, yeah, looking out for their own interests in this when there's no interest in, as you know, voting
Right, and
uh,
especially if we've
rationally.
got whatever the right description of economic misinformation is, then why do you think democracy is going to lead to good policies? If
Yeah.
people believe some really bad stuff and you listen to them, then you'll just do the bad stuff.
Yeah, Samaglu doesn't talk about this in the book. Does he have an answer for this? Kind of the
I don't think so.
irrationality of voting, and yeah,
Change the subject.
yeah. Did you listen to him on Tyler? I thought Tyler pressed him really good on the human capital
Yeah,
thing.
so yeah, I didn't. Once I was on a panel with him, but I doubt he
Yeah,
remembers me.
yeah. Tyler really pressed him on it's just demographics, and it's just kind of human capital.
Mhm.
Like as a euphemism, basically for the IQ stuff. And yeah,
Mhm.
Samaglu didn't really have
Yes.
a good response to that.
Hmm.
Yeah. Any other countries we can learn? Any other country? It's amazing we can. Yeah, so even like the Gulf Arabs are like even like the Japan. The stuff that struck me was like you go to the bathrooms are completely clean. Emirates and Qatar, it's like that well functioning.
It's
Like
cleaner. It's
it's
actually
cleaner.
cleaner.
It's cleaner than
Like,
Japan.
I mean, here's the thing: is the other times I went to Japan, went straight from the U.S. to Japan. It's like, oh, it's so incredibly clean. But my last trip, I went from the Gulf monarchies to Japan, and I'm like, hey, look, there's a scrap of
This is a
paper there.
hellhole.
They
Yeah.
wouldn't have had that.
What is this stuff?
So it's like they're like clean enough where you're actually finding fault with Japan, which is. But then the other thing is you go to Japan and you just see this incredible waste of human capital. You see people that in the United States would be middle managers who are just cashiers at a 7-Eleven. I mean, I did have some friends there saying, well, but in Japan, there's no shame to being a cashier at a 7-Eleven. It's like, well, then why are their parents so desperately concerned to get them into a top school?
Yeah.
I think the real story is that a lot of the alleged respect that the Japanese have for even the most menial jobs is really bending over backwards to being polite for something they do consider kind of a disaster.
Are Japanese still grinders like that in the way Koreans and Chinese are? Are
So
Japanese
every
hipsters?
so yes, so like I've got a friend who taught middle school and high school in Japan. Yeah, they're cram. Basically, what he said is that cram school is where the real work happens
Mhm.
because bizarrely they have this standardized national curriculum, but then the curriculum barely preps you for those all important college entrance exams, and
Mhm.
that's what you do during cram school is you finally get prepped for the thing you really need to know. So they waste their whole day with a bunch of other busy work where you're not allowed to have any variation, and then you
Yeah.
go to your cram school for the rest of the day.
Mm. Yeah. To change the subject again, did you read the Lawrence Gunther paper that I've cited a few times about immigration and the representation gap?
Let's see. At least, so I probably read your summary, but it's not ringing a bell.
Okay, so this guy he had a bunch of data that polled politicians in Europe, and then like had
Oh
polls
yeah, yeah.
matching them, and then basically the immigration was the one issue where like
Hmm.
it's like the public is to like the right wing people are like, the most right wing
Hmm.
politicians are to the left of the public, right?
Hmm.
It's kind of crazy. Like the politicians are to the left of immigrants themselves, right?
Hmm.
It's like kind of so extreme.
Hmm.
It's like a standard deviation gap. There's
Yes.
not like this on any other topic.
Hmm.
Economics is kind of where people are relative to politicians on economic issues is all over the place. In like 9 out of 15 countries or something, the elites are actually more
Hmm.
pro market, and it's six of them. The masses are more pro market based
Hmm.
on the questions that they
Hmm.
ask. But immigration, the thing is, it's completely not just immigration, but
Hmm.
also punishment for criminals. The
Ah.
public is much more punitive
Hmm.
towards criminals, and he did have like a follow up paper where basically you would ask people like, AFD's like support like declines by like
Hmm.
70% if like the Christian Democrats in Germany take a hardline position on immigration. And I wonder, I don't know, like, is this kind of thing? I know we've talked about this before. Is this kind of thing sustainable, right? Because like it looks like reform might win the next election. They're very, very right wing. We have, kind of the
Hmm.
Republicans have gone crazy, and here, France is kind of on the brink. I don't know. Like, is there? Are we getting to the point where despite the benefits of immigration, like it's so politically destabilizing that like we have to kind of rethink what countries are doing?
I mean, my honest view is that immigration is so fantastic that it's just the hill. It is the hill to die on.
Mm,
And like the only thing that really makes sense is like if we could we get more immigrants in the long run if we were to moderate a bit.
mm,
This is a big argument I've had with Tyler Cowen about backlash, and the way he uses backlash, it's so all encompassing. Almost anything counts as backlash, and I said, like the reasonable definition of backlash is not mere resistance, because it's trivial to say that if you let in immigrants, there'll be people that complain about it. I say like the meaningful sense of backlash is one where you push so hard that you get less than if you had been more moderate. That
mm,
I just keep saying like I don't see much sign that we've actually gotten there.
mm,
It's logically possible that it's gotten to that point. Definitely like those results. I find them overall pretty plausible. The main two doubts that I have. So one doubt is just that there's something intransitive about public opinion, and they may say that they really hate immigration, but they would also not be happy if you use the kind of brutality required to really get it down.
yeah, I think that's
Like,
there's
so
evidence of that.
like you remember when there's the famous photograph of the Syrian boy dead on that beach in
Yeah.
Europe, and
Well,
then there were a lot of refugees let
yeah,
in,
more
and that's
current.
one
I mean,
where it's
Trump's
like
yeah,
hmm,
the Trump approval on immigration has gone down a lot. Now people still
yes,
dislike Democrats more. So Trump is like -10 or minus on
mhm,
immigration, and then they still trust him by like 20 points over the Democrats. So they hate the brutality that it would take to get people out, even
right,
though Trump is not going that far enough. And then they dislike the
mhm,
Democrats more, which I think is
right.
I think
I
they'll
mean, of
tolerate the
course, as we know, a
brutality.
lot of that probably is a personal Trump charisma effect, where almost anything Trump does, there's a lot of the people like him. Like you remember, like there's this,
Well,
you know, like,
they don't like him on a lot of other issues.
mhm,
Immigration and
mhm,
crime tend to be his best issues. The simplest explanation is that's
mhm,
kind of, closer to where the public is.
right, and yet there was a big fall in support for him on immigration.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
So yeah,
true.
yeah. So anyway, so I'm not saying that you're that's the view that you can just win by being anti-immigrant is factually wrong. I'm saying that I think the preponderance of the evidence is yes. If you just want to win, then be anti-immigration. There's one doubt about sometimes the public wants a result, but they don't want it with the brutality required to achieve it. So like you remember your line about how like the way to actually get black crime down would be extremely harsh policing.
Mm,
And then you say, but blacks are against it and whites don't have the stomach for it.
mm.
It may be that you're wrong, actually, and whites do have the stomach for it. And the only way to find out is
No,
to see
but
what
I think
happens.
immigration, you actually can do it. All you have to do is you have to put it out of sight. So once they're in, there's a backlash to like grabbing people off the streets once they've made it.
Mhm,
But like Europe has actually, there's an Economist article on this. They've like worked out deals with whatever government
mhm,
exists in
yes,
Libya and like these other North African
yes,
countries and Turkey. And as long as it's out of sight, out of
yes,
mind,
yes,
the public is completely happy with that. And
yes,
same
yes.
thing
So,
with
and
stay in
yeah,
Mexico
yeah,
policy. Yeah.
yeah, totally right. And it's the same logic as look, I didn't murder my wife. I hired an assassin to blame
Yeah.
him.
Yeah. That's public opinion. Yeah.
Yes. Now, the other reason to doubt is just that if you go and look at those public opinion surveys where they just ask people to say what's the most important issue to you, immigration is not generally listed as that important of an
Well,
issue.
actually, the Gunther paper has immigration as the number one issue for like 20% of Europeans, which is like
Okay,
which
20% of European countries or 20% of Europeans?
Europeans and like
Okay, so
average.
I know you.
It
So
might have been,
U.S. data, I think Republicans, it is
yeah,
common to put it as one of their top
yeah,
issues, but
yeah.
averaging over the whole U.S.
It might have been
population,
just he might have just had data for it was either the EU or Germany, but it was the top issue, and it was like 20%, but nothing else was even close. Yeah,
okay.
that was part of his argument was that like
Mhm.
what happened between like the last 10, 15 years is it just people were always anti-immigration, it just increased in salience. So the number of people saying it's the number one issue just really shot up. So you're right, the Americans
Mhm.
and the Europeans are in a different maybe in a different place here. The
Mhm.
Europeans, I mean, objectively, like you look at the crime rate, like in America they have to lie about the immigrant crime. In Europe, it's actually true. So that's
Right. Oh, yeah. So
gotta be the
true
difference.
relatively. Yes, immigrants are more criminal than native-born Europeans. It's also just
Yeah,
true that they've got definitely low violent crime.
yeah,
So, you
probably
know,
yeah.
like,
About as violent as white Americans are. So
I mean, like if
yeah,
Japan let in a lot of low-skilled immigrants, it would be amazing if they didn't have 10 times the violent crime rate of the Japanese.
mhm,
But that primarily reflects that the incredible
yeah,
lack of violence of the Japanese more than the
yeah,
horrible danger of the immigrants.
yeah.
It's
Europeans
the
are.
usual thing where, like, if there's a super low risk, you can multiply tenfold and it remains an absolute low risk that a reasonable person doesn't think about much.
Mhm. So is the idea just you want to maximize immigration because there's other concerns here, right? If it really really destabilizes our politics, if
Mm-hmm.
like really crazy people like start to get power and influence, and they kind of dismantle institutions, people like Trump, like it's arguably
Mm-hmm.
happening in America now. That's also got to be a consideration, right? Kind of what's going to happen to our like institutions and the functioning of these countries.
Yeah, well, let me put it this way. If Trump was really pro immigration, I'd be pro Trump.
I think I would. I mean, I would too. I think I would be
Yeah.
close to him. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Look,
that's
I mean, I think he's a terrible person. And if you were to go and just list everything bad about him, it's like, yes, but like what he's actually doing on balance is still a good thing. And if someone says these institutions are really important, like,
yeah.
honestly, I'd say, like,
You're talking about
he's,
the wokeness stuff, right? Like the kind of what
yes,
they're doing at universities, a lot of the deregulation stuff
right.
like that.
Yeah, and then I mean, so like the first time I really started thinking that maybe I'm wrong, and even if Trump were really pro-immigration, he would be on that bad was Liberation Day,
Yeah, yeah, because it was so
right?
crazy, right?
Yes, yeah. So you basically like take the like you know everything to do with with international trade and both goods and labor, goods and labor aside, and then it's like okay, so he's doing some really stupid things. He's also the first person to go and actually fix some things that people have taken for granted. And he's a terrible person. I wouldn't want to be in the same room with him just because I can't stand people like that. This is one thing. Like whenever you said Trump is funny, like to me, like there's nothing funny about him at all. Like it's just my flesh. Like my flesh is always crawled. And
Did
like,
you see the clip where he's sitting there with Erdogan and he's like, "Oh, the election was rigged against me." The election, and he points to Erdogan. It's like this guy knows about rigged election. that's that's funny. Come on.
if you said it, it'd be funny.
Okay, you're letting your
Yeah, to
politics.
me, it's just like yeah. I mean, probably another difference. Is like I never liked macho people. Never liked like a guy who just comes in and like I'm big man. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
What about like
I
James
mean, I still
Bond? Anyone
remember
like the
like
James?
back in the late '90s on the Daily Show.
Uh,
This is before Jon Stewart was even running it. There was some woman who had gone to jail for Bill Clinton because she went to contempt of court, refused to testify against him, and then the guy interviewing her said, there's some people who just don't like Bill Clinton," and the woman said, "You know what? I think you're totally right. Just like there's some people who don't like the captain of the football team." And I'm like, yeah, I hated that guy and I hate Clinton.
yeah.
Of course. Like, and then I'm like, oh yeah, most people do like the captain of the football team and do
Mm.
like Clinton, and I'm the weird one.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I don't have that as much. I think that like the fact that it becomes like Elon Musk, for example, like just like when you get to the point where it's just kind of lying all the time. Trump is like that too, but he's such a clown and it's such kind of divorced from human norms that it kind of just becomes a funny thing. Much less. It's much easier to like him if he's not president. I mean, the fact that he's president kind of changes things.
Yeah, I guess I
Um,
watched one or two episodes of The Apprentice in
mm,
the old days before, and like I didn't say I can't watch this. I have to change the channel. But I
yeah,
mean, once you have a guy who's that epistemically negligent getting his hands near power, then it's just oh my
yeah.
god, this is
Yeah. Well, I mean, people would say like
what a system.
maybe the immigration issue gives us like Trump's, like maybe that's the like I don't know what the long term kind of solution. Like, can you just like have the public be this mad for this long period of time. Maybe they get over it, or then maybe like the politics just kind of spirals and gets crazier, and you have these people who are just as bad as Trump, and they kind of degrade all the institutions. I mean, it's a kind of long term risk.
I mean, honestly, I think what I would say to someone who says, "Look, what can I do where I will appear to be tough on immigration and yet actually, like I'm doing as much as I can," and that's where I would say, all right, well, so basically, like really make a harsh example of immigrant criminals, immigrant
Yeah,
terrorists, like and like and even things like saying like if there's immigrants that are supporting terrorism, like we'll just
yeah,
deport them, and it's like these people like are messing things up for millions of innocent people.
yeah,
And if
yeah.
someone said like
That's a
that,
good idea.
we'll just go and target like
Yeah,
just some like particularly odious individuals.
yeah,
And then you may say, well, what about their free speech rights or whatever? And it's like, well, what about the rights of millions of people just to go and clean toilets? I think that's a much more important right for a much
yeah.
larger number of people. So I think I would say, like, basically take advantage of availability bias, find a few totally odious immigrants and go and do something bad to them, which
Mm,
maybe they,
yeah.
maybe deserve. And then like while you're loudly doing that, then also at the same time be like multiplying the H-1B quota by a factor of
Yeah.
10 and waving in as many like everyone with student visa and otherwise and basically having an informal understanding like we don't bother agriculture, we don't bother hospitality industry, we don't bother
Mhm.
restaurants. Uh,
Yeah. I mean, the Trump administration is doing this a little bit, like the DHS, like Twitter would be like, "Oh, this guy was a child molester, and here's his picture, and now he's being deported." So they do that. But the thing is, these people just don't like immigration, period.
yes.
So it's
Right.
along with a program of making life difficult for foreign students
Yeah.
and this
Yeah.
other stuff. But
So
yeah, for like a future like administration that doesn't dislike immigration itself, like that, I think is good advice. Really clamp down on the criminals, and then you would be given a lot of leeway to do other things.
yeah, that reminds me. So I did a pair of surveys on X, and one of them was, uh, you know, what could basically what made the right so much worse in America? And you had the choices of like wokeness much more than immigration, wokeness somewhat more, and then vice versa, and then the same options for Europe. And basically for the U.S. it was pretty split between people thought that wokeness was what drove the right crazy and immigration what drove them crazy, whereas for Europe almost everyone was convinced that it was immigration that drove them
Yeah.
crazy.
Well,
So,
yeah,
like in the U.S., I think the theme of just focus all of your anger on wokeness and then forget about immigration seems like it's a viable option for Europe. It's definitely harder. Although even there,
yeah,
I would say like focus on like the really obvious one for Europe is cutting back the welfare state for immigrants.
yeah,
And like this is something where we say, look, people should come from all around the world here to work, not to go and not to sponge off of us. And we're changing the system to ensure that happens. And yes, we don't want people to come here and sponge off of us. And if that's your plan, there's no place for you in Germany anymore, no place for you in Sweden. But if you're here to go and contribute to work, then like think that's like that's we're fine with that. And then to actually do it.
uh,
I mean,
yeah,
right? I mean, like, of course, even in the U.S., you get this attitude, but in Europe, the idea of like this is our system here, and you are asking us to compromise our principle that either
mm,
you can't be here at all or you get a pile of free stuff.
yeah,
And it's like what a stupid pair of principles.
yeah, yeah. And there is a national rallies doing a little bit of this, yeah, but it is in the service of
Mhm.
uh cutting immigration. Do you worry about the differential fertility? Like the world is gonna be, like overwhelmingly African in a few decades. Is that something to be concerned about? Like, are we just gonna have the demographics of Africa in every first world country?
So I don't think that immigration from Africa is going to be allowed on any significant scale. So
Yeah.
if
So
if it were, I mean, so I think that like within a generation of actually moving to Europe, then African birth rates would fall a lot. So I mean,
yeah.
honestly,
If you
you
wanted
might
to
you might say a certain kind of scientific racist should want to go and have open borders in order to get African birth rates down.
yeah,
Like again, especially if you're the kind of racist who's just like I just want to minimize the absolute number of Africans on Earth, then
yeah.
yes, you'd want to go get them as rich as possible.
Yeah, yeah, that would
Um,
be you'd be a globalist. Yeah, you'd be a globalist racist,
yes,
right? Who cares about
right.
these things on an
Yeah.
international level?
So,
Yeah,
in terms of places where immigration has worked out the most poorly, I think South Africa is going to be high up on the list. So, my understanding is a large share of the African population of South Africa are descended from migrants to
mm,
an area that was actually pretty white before.
Migrants. For how recently?
So, like basically over the course of the last 100, 150 years.
Yeah, yeah, the long term, right? Migrants,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah, it's
Yes.
been a while. Yeah,
Right. Right. And yeah, this is one where I'll say, like, so like, maybe that's true, and that's just an uncomfortable truth.
yeah.
But like another, so another story. Look, like, if they had gone and basically tried to go and integrate the black population from a position of strength. So to make sure, like as long as as the ANC fighting a terrorist campaign against us, we won't give you an inch. But if everything is nice and peaceful, then we're going to start doing things piecemeal. We're going to go and have blacks that own a business or blacks with college degrees. We're going to let them vote. We're going to start relaxing things and just very gradually have a non-oppositional black elite that we're going to build. And if they'd done that from a position of strength, like I think things would be looking a lot better in South Africa. Instead, they basically
It's hard to pull off. I mean, we're kind of in a global era
Mhm.
where like property rights for voting is not a thing anywhere, right? They would have to do something completely a different kind of system.
like,
So
like like South Africa in 1980 was already completely
it
different.
was
So
completely different. Yeah,
yeah,
they could have said blacks
yes.
who own businesses
Right.
could vote,
Yeah,
and maybe that would.
honestly, when you read that, when you study the history of South Africa, the whole thing is just like, what was their white minority leadership even thinking? Like when they said, we're not going to go and back Rhodesia, we're going to let Rhodesia go down, and it's like, and you read like, why? It's like, well, we felt like international public opinion, we need to appease it. Like,
Yeah,
well, like, and then
yeah.
three
There's
years
nothing for you
later,
to think.
who
Yeah,
do you think is next? Like these are like your only sincere friends in the world. You think you'd be
right.
backing them, like no matter come what may. And like it really seems like they just never had any really long-term plan for what they were going to do.
Mm,
And you know,
yeah.
and I think if they had a long-term plan, if they said, look, like the long run goal is to have a peaceful society where there's going to be inequality, but it's going to be the kind that people can live with, nobody wants to fight over, and uh, basically we're going to be like the ethnic Chinese in Southeast Asia, and we don't want pogroms against us.
Mhm.
And we're gonna, and like even to go and design something where you have like one third of the seats go to whites, one third go to blacks, one third, and then one
Yeah.
third is up for a general election, that kind of thing.
Is it? Was it? I mean,
And to move
weren't
towards
they?
that seems like it
Yeah.
would have been a lot more functional than
Well,
what
I
they
don't know the
did.
history that well, but wasn't there an attempt to make Bantustans? Wasn't that a plan at some point that they were going to have white states and black states?
There was some effort specifically to go and carve out some all black areas.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, it was not one where they had some plan to go and have everybody, like everyone currently, like in within the borders of South Africa, be having prosperity and freedom, and not, and basically there's never a plan to move to a colorblind prosperous society.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
And if someone has said this is our long term goal, like unfortunately, if we just do it now, it's just going to be a terrible bloodbath, or I mean, it's also notable how long it took for South Africa to get bad.
Yeah.
Meaning to write something about this, so I did write something pretty pro what happened in South
How
Africa
long to
about
get
15
bad?
years
I mean,
ago.
apartheid only fell in like early 1990s, right? So it's been
Yeah,
only it
that's
hasn't
right.
been a like it took a generation, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so it's important to know that like there was a low-level civil war happening around the year that it happened, and it barely got reported in Western media, but the body count was actually, I think, like 10, 20,000 in a
Mm.
country that where the population of the time would have been maybe like a fifth of the US.
Mhm.
So it was like, like
Oh,
it was one
I didn't know this. Really, they covered up a civil war in South Africa. That's pretty
usually
interesting.
low level. This
No,
thing like
10,000 count. I mean, 10,000. If you look at it, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict before
yeah,
the recent thing.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they would never have
Yeah.
10,000 in a
Yes. Yeah.
yes in a year.
That's right. So, I mean, I would check that before writing it, but I have a
Yeah,
strong memory that that was true. But anyway, but it's true that they basically had like 20 years where it looked like the economic growth was going well, and at least white safety was going down, but at least white income wasn't. And then
mhm,
right around the time I wrote a piece saying, "Oh, so it didn't look like it worked out that badly," then
yeah,
things
yeah.
started going downhill.
And sometimes, yeah, and sometimes like people online will like talk about immigration and they'll say, "Oh, look at South Africa." And I'm like, the world is not South Africa. I mean, that's
Yeah.
not the demographics. That's not the situation we're looking at. You
Mhm.
really do have to look at every country, look at every
Mhm.
situation
Mhm.
individually.
Yeah, so like when people say like, like aren't there cases where immigration has been bad? I said, look, I'm I do study history. I do look for counterexamples. Like the cases where immigration has been really dangerous or even led to civil war is when you have one fairly homogeneous group that has a strong sense of identity already, and they generally are in favor of some really bad political changes, and then they move to a country en masse to the point where they're at least close to the median voter.
Mm.
That
Yeah.
so and you know and so that basically describes Jordan, Lebanon, and South Africa with some variations. Of course, they didn't move in there like in the same sense, but basically you got a group where like it's there. With South Africa, they're like instantly majority once you have one man, one vote, and they've built up this identity. Which, of course, a lot of the reason why they've got this shared identity is because of apartheid. Through the usual mechanism of if they all say that they're a group, then I guess everybody who can't be in that group is also
Mm.
part of a group.
Carl Smith brings up Argentina, which I think Garrett Jones
Mhm,
talks about in his book as a place where immigration. I don't know if this is right, but
mhm.
do you think that do you agree with his reading of Argentina?
I would just say that I don't know enough about it. What I will say is that Garrett's argument, if you remember exactly what he says, it totally doesn't work because Garrett wants to go and say, we go and see what's happening in the origin country, and then we use that to predict what will go wrong in the destination country.
Mm.
And yet, if you take a look at what happened to Italy after World War II, of course, it went from being one of the poorest countries in Europe to having super fast growth and actually catching up to the UK. So,
Yeah.
by that same Jonesian reasoning, he should have expected all that Italian immigration to
Yeah.
South America would have been great after World War II.
Yeah, I don't understand it because they weren't coming into British population, right? The Argentines were Spaniards, right?
Yes, yes,
So,
also
like,
true.
are Italians
Also
that
true.
much more socialist than Spaniards? I thought it
Um,
was equal.
so, I mean, I think like I would say that if you look at modern data, yeah, the Spaniards were actually worse.
Yeah.
The Italians, like while they did have a larger communist party than I think Spain has had at least since the Spanish Civil War. The difference is the Italians are, I would say, just quite a bit less ideological than the Spaniards.
Mm.
The Spaniards are sort of classic people that get into politics because they're looking for some substitute religious fanaticism.
Mm.
So, like, I do know the history of the Spanish Civil War very well. These are
Mm.
basically people who, in an earlier century, would have been fighting a war of religion. And
Yeah.
then in the modern world, they fight a war of political religion. The Italians I see as much more of just like sheer, like New Jersey thuggery,
Mm. Yeah.
where, like even the parties that allegedly have some ideology, it's much more about just giving jobs to your followers.
Mm.
And it's just, much more corrupt. And, like my general view is if your ideas are bad, then corruption's good because it stops you from doing the really terrible stuff that's required by the
Yeah.
ideology.
Yeah. One more thing I want to ask you about we talked about you noticed that when Youngkin won in Virginia when he became governor,
Mhm.
things got better. Any updates on what university is
Mm.
like since Trump came along?
Yes. Um, let's see. I can tell you a bunch of things. Let me just see if I can go in order. Um, so there was a meeting right so I actually was the only faculty member invited to speak. And this is one where we're again, anyway, just to back up. So the way that was, so George Mason, there are 16 people on the board of visitors, and this is the oversight board. These are the people in principle can go and fire the president of the university. And in principle, we can't give tenure to anybody without their approval. But anyway, and then the governor gets to appoint 4 of these people every year. So, like the first year, it's going to be for his 4 guys, and then the 12 people from whoever the previous person was. And we also have a 1-term limit for governor. Okay,
Mm.
so these are the institutional rules. So, what happened was, for a long time, it was essentially rubber stamp, and whoever the governor appoints got to go through. But finally, Youngkin appointed people that were sufficiently right wing and just different from previous people that actually I think it's the Virginia Senate that gets to go and appoint and confirm. And so the last 4 didn't get confirmed.
Mm.
So basically, the last meeting, there were only 12 out of 16 and 4 vacant slots, but that's still a quorum. There's still able to do stuff. And this is basically the meeting where we're having a discussion over what people imprecisely called this is a DEI abolition.
Mm.
It was essentially a meeting on should the renamed DEI office be exclusively limited to doing only things that are required by law.
Mm.
And so I got to speak. It was kind of funny because it's the only time I've ever been protested as I spoke
Mm.
in my whole life. Right. And but they're like 2 feet away from me holding up protest signs.
Mm.
And then there was someone who shouts out, why does he get to speak? And I
Mm.
was like, oh, I wish I was better on my feet because I would have said, well, during the last 20 years, did you ever have a single person like me come and offer his
Mm.
opinion? No. So like this is finally my turn to go and say something different from what you've been hearing. That
Yeah.
there was only one voice for 20 years, and now you get to
Mm.
finally hear the dissent. But anyway, that meeting they actually tabled the decision. So they did not go and vote for what people were imprecisely calling DEI abolition. And there are at least two other state of Virginia schools that did full abolition where they actually got rid and shut down the office. This University of
Mm.
Virginia and James Madison. So anyway, uh, then they just sat on it for a bit. The last thing I heard was that they did finally pass that measure saying DEI is limited only to what is legally required. It does leave this vestigial element, which in my mind is like leaving a little bit of cancer in the body. And it's like, will it grow back? And
Mm.
why didn't you just cut out the last little bit just to be safe? They also made the decision to keep hiring our president. So he's going to be around. And then right after that, somehow they
Is the
lost.
president that woke black guy, or is it someone
Yeah,
else?
yeah, that's right. There are people that dispute how woke he really is, but yeah, I
Well,
share his
didn't he
point.
say? I saw a clip of the after you were speaking. Wasn't he like, "We know this is hurtful" or something? Wasn't he like kind of, uh,
Maybe.
yeah,
Um, so, like, well, the main thing I know is that in 2020 he did send out a memo, which was the most shockingly ideologically woke thing that I've ever seen officially adopted by any university. And I'm reading this, it's like, well, if this is actually meant to be taken seriously, then can I still teach my classes?
mm,
Can I still teach the economics of discrimination? Is that allowed?
mm,
Um, and recently that was actually finally scrubbed from the university website entirely. It
mm,
was sort of in a hidden place, but I did find it still up there actually. And then probably because I actually kept publicizing it, they did take it down. Although don't worry, I do have archives, so they can never
mm,
get away from what they did. But anyway, the very last thing that happened is somehow they managed to get rid of a number of other of the visitors, so now they don't have a quorum, so now they can't do anything.
mm.
And there's another election for Virginia governor
Wait,
coming right up.
how did they get rid of how did those people leave?
I do not understand the rules well enough to see how they went from 12 to say, okay, I think part of it was one or two of the visitors actually went to work for Trump.
Mm,
And
okay.
then maybe the other thing, maybe the remaining one was that some terms expired and they refused to appoint the remaining Yelkin appointees. That I'm hazy on.
Mhm,
Right. But yes. But anyway, so now it basically depends upon who wins the election. I think betting odds say that Democrats have an 80 to 90% chance of winning.
yeah.
Uh, and then the real question comes down to this. So, uh, will the Democrats, the first opportunity, go and reinvigorate DEI to the full extent that not just the law, but that vigorous litigation will allow? Or could it actually be, which is my view, that even a lot of Democrats really don't like the woke
Yeah.
people and the
Well,
woke
the
people just
favorite to
kind of care
win,
about their friends?
yeah, the
And I've talked
favorite,
to people at corporations where they went and got rid of DEI, and there's a lot of people that previously were saying how great it was who just
yeah.
dropped it.
Yeah, I've been saying this is the optimistic case of the Trump presidency and what he's doing. That in universities, basically the anti-DEI stuff will stick, and a lot of the other stuff they're doing potentially
Mhm.
will not.
Yes.
And by the way, for Virginia, the person running the Democrat is named Abigail Spanberger, who's known as a pretty moderate Democrat. So if if there's a chance that it can be
Yes.
okay, even if she wins.
Yeah, yeah. So, like, you know, like, I am actually, so according to multiple journalists, I am the only GMU faculty member that will talk to them about
Really,
what's going on here.
really, why won't
Yes.
Robin or Tyler? I mean, these guys
Yeah,
aren't shy.
so they either they haven't been
They tried
asked or they
them.
don't want to talk. Tyler doesn't want to talk.
Yeah,
Robin, I think, hasn't been asked. Although, like, Robin's been so badly treated that I can understand why he would not want to talk to anybody. But
does
yeah, like
he?
Todd Zawicki of the law school, he sued George Mason, and apparently he doesn't want to talk to the media either.
Hmm,
So anyway,
interesting.
it is striking to me how like I'm like the only person going and talking about how GMU is guilty and of what they're accused of in the lawsuit. Always
Hmm.
preface with I'm not a lawyer, but like I speak English and I think we're totally guilty. I
The
can tell you
lawsuit.
why.
Wait, are you talking about the Todd Zawisky lawsuit?
No. That was about vax mandates. No. The current lawsuit is about discrimination in like in I think both hiring and admissions.
From
What I
who's the
would say,
plaintiff? Who's the plaintiff?
US, I think, as far as I understand, Department of Justice or whatever. I mean, you're the lawyer.
Oh, the Department of Justice is suing
Yes,
the
yeah, I
university
believe it is Department of
just to
Justice.
say don't discriminate. Okay, I see.
Yeah, so
Uh,
like I'm not a lawyer, so I that is my preface. But
yeah.
like what I've seen, I just think that George Mason is totally 100% guilty.
Is Zawisky sued them over the vaccine mandate? Did he want to take the COVID vax?
Well, specifically, he said that he had natural immunity and he could get verification for that, so he didn't want to do it. That's right.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. I didn't know that. Okay.
And they settled, and then you can read all about the settlement in the Washington Post, and
Mhm.
like there were two different versions of what the settlement said, but I believe Todd because he's a lawyer, he's not going to lie about a settlement. I think maybe he could get disbarred for that.
Mhm.
Whereas when GMU what they said, it's like that just sounds like a press release. So, but I
Mhm.
don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, Bryan, this is a good conversation. Anything else you
Definitely.
wanna?
Well, so bottom line, like all ye economists out there, yeah, when you hear people saying demonstrably false things about economics, correct them. They should be corrected,
Yes.
and that goes not just for factual matters, but for basic causation as well. Um, and the fact that you know of a abstruse theoretical model where common sense is wrong is not a good reason to go and say, who knows?
Mm.
It's a reason to say, yeah, like that's an abstruse model and it's not relevant to the real world. Paul
Mm.
Krugman, by the way, was great on this stuff in the 80s and 90s. He wrote a bunch of papers where free trade was bad. And then he wrote another paper saying, well, you shouldn't listen to those papers.
Mm.
And what you should be listening to is the basic insights of Smith and Ricardo. That's what
Yeah,
really
yeah.
counts for trade policy. And this other stuff is interesting,
Yeah.
but there's this line from I think Edgeworth where he said that all these theoretical exceptions to free trade should be treated like poison. Put a label, put the skull and
Yeah.
crossbones on it, and put it up on the top shelf so nobody accidentally takes it.
Yeah. I mean, these people that the Krugman thing sounds like these people are talking about upper division courses, and then like the world has not understood economics 101,
Yep.
right? And so
Right.
it's like that's where we got them up to. So yeah,
Yep.
and also if you're economists out there, I'll release this later. You will too on your Substack, I assume, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, don't be partisan. It's like the other thing. Like have some
Mm-hmm.
pride as like a
Yep.
professional and like a scholar who knows
Yep.
something, and don't like
Mm-hmm.
subordinate that
Yeah.
to culture war considerations.
Right. And again, especially probably the worst thing that economists tell the media, and something is itself misinformation. There are multiple pieces that I quote in my book where you have top economists saying, well, look, I'm one of the few courageous people who admits that markets can sometimes fail. I'm one of the few courageous economists who doesn't subscribe to the dogma of market fundamentalism. This is one where it's like, look, you know as well as I do that almost every call you have is a lifelong Democrat. So what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah. All right. It's been fun, Bryan. And yeah, until next time.
All right. Until next time. Bye bye.